Good morning, you're watching Addis News Hour. I'm Zwota Desaling. Thank you for joining us and do stay tuned. Political scholar argues that Africa as a continent should apply its own solutions to a wide range of problems affecting it. Shimelis Hailu, who is a political scholar, said Ethiopia's wise decision of reaching a peace settlement to bring an end to the northern conflict is a key witness to the country's unwavering stance to African solution for African problems. Tugusernesa has the following account.
The term African solution to African problems has been coined by Ethiopian leaders time and time again. The concept has been intended to be used to galvanize Africans to reject the imposition of several unworkable and unfair foreign interventions in Africa and urge African elites to take charge of the crisis on the continent. On May 25, 1963, the then Organization of African Unity, OAU, was established with a permanent headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Ever since the establishment of the then OAU, Ethiopia has been playing an unprecedented role in trying to unify Africans in bringing African solutions to African problems. Political scholar Shimelis Hailu argues Ethiopia's position in bringing continental-owned solutions to a wide range of problems affecting the continent has been a lingering reply of Ethiopian leaders that could be taken as witness to Ethiopia's major role.
Ethiopia has been trying at its level based in the Horn region for more than 3 decades, trying to find African solutions to African problems. Ethiopia has played a major role in bringing about lasting peace between South Sudan and Sudan, deploying peacekeeping troops and trying to apply comprehensive peace agreements between the two nations.
The scholar further added that Ethiopia's wise decision in reaching a peace settlement to bring an end to the northern conflict is a key witness to the country's unwavering stance in bringing lasting African solution to African problems.
When a number of foreign actors, such as the US and the likes of it, were urging to intervene in the northern conflict, Ethiopia only allowed actors from the African Union, which showcases the country's firm stance on putting in place African solutions to African problems.
Shimelis reiterated that undue foreign interventions in Africa will expose a certain country for uncalled for pressures that will end up in crisis and political turmoil, which this particularly calls for strengthening of African solutions to African problems far better.
A Pan-Africanist said the victory of Adwa had made many African countries free themselves from colonization. Talking to ETV, Akalo Abraham, who is a Pan-Africanist, urged African nations to struggle and move forward with the spirit of the victory of Adwa. Goshameluso has the full account. Take a look.
The month of February is highly associated with Ethiopian history as well as the black people across the globe. Ethiopia had experienced black scars in registered golden history in the month of February. In this month, various events observed in Ethiopia, like the commemoration of Martyrs' Day, AU Summit, and the victory of Adwa, to mention a few. Talking to ETV, Pan-Africanist Akalo Abraham said the victory of Adwa has ignited many more African countries to seek their independence from colonial rule and slavery.
Adwa already ignited many more African nations to free themselves from colonialism. That is the amazing moment that Adwa played for the black nations. That is Pan-Africanism, where it started. You see, it was, I think you remember, Organization of African Union started, right. Established in 1963. That was the spirit of Adwa brought Pan-Africanism in general, I can say.
Ethiopian forefathers and mothers had been sacrificed for the sovereignty, human dignity and equality, said Akalu.
Our ancestors, our forefathers, our foremothers died for the sovereign nation, for the dignity of humanity, for the reputation of its citizen, right? Yeah. And then they were died for that. So we have to learn that why people died like that. So they died or they killed for the sake of saying no to the supremacy of the whites. That is, living, celebrating the humanity at the same time.
The Pan-Africanist urged African nations should unite and move forward with the spirit of Adwa victory.
We need to be united as one, as an African, as human, We need to have solidarity in between. We need to think for each other and then bring this nation to the next level. We don't have to suffer. We don't have to see the same old stories. So the concept of Pan-Africanism must be immersed in this generation as well. So that is what we learn from the concept of Adwa and the Pan-Africanism.
Ethiopia is set to commemorate the 127th Adwa victory over Italy on March 2, 2023 with various assortments.
You're watching Addis News Hour, and we have arrived at the segment of what's been trending over the past 24 hours, as I am joined by our staff member, Daniel Kassan. Daniel, good morning.
Good morning.
So with that being said, as we have to dive towards what's been trending over the past 24 hours, let's not actually forget that next week all Ethiopians will be celebrating the victory of Adwa. I think it is the 125th anniversary of the victory of Adwa, and of course with the interlinkage of the Pan-Africanism, I think we've got a few more to address over here. And with the trend, with what's been trending over the past 24 hours, I couldn't actually believe that it has been already a year with the observance and remembrance with regards to the Russia-Ukraine war, and I think you have a summage about what could be addressed over here.
Yeah, some points on the issues you mentioned. Long ago, the fight between Ethiopian patriots and the Italian invaders turned a new history in the world. History is rewritten again. There were previously white supremacy worldwide, but that event, the determination and the dedication, the devotion of all Ethiopians in order to defend the sovereignty and integrity of Ethiopia has made a new history, and history is rewritten again, and now the world has a new history in relation to the black people and the white people. The victory of Adwa has lots of advantage for the black people. By the way, this February is the month of the Black History. The Black History Month is observed, and Ethiopia also this month observes the victory of Adwa. Earlier, when in the news we heard the scholar or the activists indicated that urged for the unity of Africans. The unity of Africans cannot come only with the advice or the talks we're making. You have to have a tangible outcome or evidence, or you have to have something which unites the people, like the victory of Adwa. We can mention the Ethiopian athletes, beginning from Abeba Bikila, the marathon runner. He has made history for Africa. Daratutul from the female, she made history for Africa. We can mention the Ethiopian Airlines. You see, if you have something like this, like the Ethiopian Airlines, which has become the flag carrier for Ethiopia and a pride for the African continent. If you have something achieved like this, it gets you united. Now many of the nations of the continent are using the Ethiopian Airlines in order to go worldwide. You see, you have to have something like this in order to get united. We have lots of talks in every summit, but the talks may not be enough. We have to have tangible outcomes, tangible evidences in fighting or in the development spheres. That brings you united. Recently, the African Union was looking for the African Continental Free Trade Area. If you have something to sell, if you are productive, if you are industrialized, if you have something to sell, it pulls, it attracts, it unites you. Okay? Otherwise, the talks may not be that much enough. The talks we are urging the experts, the leaders, the ministers urging Africans to get united may not come with only talks. We have to have tangible evidence, like the victory of Adwa. Now Africans have the greatest enemy, which is poverty. Poverty has to be alleviated. Every nation has to work hard and become productive and help their people to get out of poverty. If we make something like this, if we help each other, like Ethiopia recently exporting wheat to neighboring country, if you have something it brings you together, it integrates you, and integration and the union aspired by Africans will be effective. The other point I would like to mention is the Ukraine-Russia war. It has made a year. Now this February is being observed, and we've seen this President Joe Biden visiting Kiev, Ukraine, and he has made a speech in Poland, in Warsaw, for nations who belong to NATO, and also Putin on his part has made a public speech about this war. From both sides, we heard that there was no sign of escalation of the war. Both sides are looking for victories, which means the war is going to be extended. But the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, he has urged both sides to escalate the war and to pursue a peaceful means, because it has ravaged lots of resources, human and material resources. So the advice from the Secretary General is, if accepted, is helpful to have a peaceful means and resolve the adverse situation which affected not only both countries, almost which affected the whole world. So peaceful means should be encouraged, and we hope there will be better means for a solution for this problem.
Sublime, Daniel. Before thanking you and diving towards the next news bulletins, I'd like to apologize for our viewers that I have made a mistake on the year of the anniversary of the victory of Adwa. It's 127 years.
Right.
Thank you very much.
127 years. And by the way, this year there will be a special event to commemorate this Adwa victory. It's going to be led by the Ministry of Defense. Will be organized by the Minister of Defense, and there will be lots of events to happen in this week.
Which ETV language will cover it wonderfully. Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
The spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Ambassador Meles Alem, stated that Ethiopia has effectively hosted the 36th African Union Summit. In his bi-weekly press briefing, Ambassador Meles noted that heads of states and governments, as well as representatives of African countries, have participated in the summit. He recalled that the summit was also attended by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the representatives of China, Russia, USA, UAE, EU, and delegates from other countries and international multilateral organizations across the globe. About 1,000 journalists have covered the continental event, the spokesperson said, and he recalled that the Ethiopian government has established a national committee to host the summit successfully. The spokesperson added that Ethiopia actively participated in the summit to defend and sustain its national interests. The African Development Bank is supporting to accelerate implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and boosting inter-Africa trade. This is according to the president of the bank. In an exclusive interview with the Ethiopian news agency, African Development Bank Group President Akinwumi Adesina said the African Continental Free Trade Area will link together economies worth about $3.4 trillion and is the largest free trade zone in the world in terms of number of countries that are participating. As African Development Bank, integrating African is one of our high 5 priorities, Adesina stated, and he said that the bank has been providing supports to help the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area and strengthen infrastructure in the region. Furthermore, the African Development Bank has been supporting Africa Visa Index to ensure free mobility of people to encourage trade, and improvements have been observed. The United Nations Development Programme has said that the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is the game-changer project for African countries. Talking to ETV English, UNDP Regional Bureau Director for Africa, Ahuna Eziakonwa, said accelerating the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is critical to bring prosperity to Africa.
The African Continental Free Trade for us is a game changer. It is the voice of prosperity on the continent, because I think for a very long time, we have approached the development on the continent from a perspective of poverty, right? So this initiative, this arrangement really helps to make a shift from looking at Africa from a lens of problems and poverty to a lens of promise and prosperity. Because when Africa trades with itself, and at the moment it's extremely low in terms of Africa's trade interaction with Africa, and we believe that the African member states really took a bold step when they made the decision to launch the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. It is the one big thing that's been missing in the equation in terms of overcoming poverty, but also fostering prosperity on the continent. Integration, regional integration. There is no region that you can name that has developed without robust regional integration. So this is, for us, what it means is that this arrangement has to go from paper to action. It must be implemented.
According to the regional director, UNDP is focusing on how the African Continental Free Trade Area is benefiting the young, women, and marginalized people in the continent.
Our main focus is to ensure that this arrangement benefits those that are usually left behind, the young people, the women. Actually, if you look at the volume of trade across the continent, particularly cross-border trade, it's enabled by women. But these women face impossible constraints. There's abuse along the journey. There is extortion. There is exploitation. And the Continental Free Trade Agreement could begin to tackle some of this. But also there's absence of information for a lot of the women because they're not in leadership positions. They're not often in the political circles where the power of information matters. So a deliberate move has to be made to ensure that women benefit from all the goods that will come out of an arrangement like this. They need capacity and they need financing to be able to boost their ability to take advantage of this. And that's where UNDP is focusing.
The Political Affairs, Peace and Security Commissioner with the AU, Abdel Fattah Moussa, urged Africans to unite for the development of the continent by scraping unfair Western economic dependency. According to the Commissioner, the socio-economic as well as political dependency is a factor deep-rooted in problem in the continent for African countries. Kasaun Jani has more details.
The Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security with the AU, Abdel Fattah Moussa, called upon all African nations to strengthen sustainable development, elevate socio-economic burdens.
There is increasingly a convergence of views that Africa cannot depend upon the outside world for its economic growth, for its peace and security, and that everything must begin from the continent. So there is that growing belief among the African leaders. The most important thing is actually to transform it into political will.
The development of fundamental infrastructure facilities and focusing on the removal of potential trade obstacles are also necessary for economic integration among African countries. He pointed out that trade among African nations should be given top priority and further enhanced in order to assure economic progress.
How are we in the coming year? We are going to increase the trade among African countries rather than trade with countries outside the continent. Trade among African countries today constitutes just about 17%. And the continent contributes to global trade at the rate of only 12%. How do we reverse these negative trends? It's about removing those barriers. Both tariff and non-tariff barriers that affect intra-African trade, so that we can boost it. We've got what to produce. The continent, pound by pound, for pound, is about the richest continent on the world, the most endowed.
He also emphasized that with a population growth rate of 2.6%, Africa continues to have the fastest rate of population growth in the world, despite ethnic conflict, man-made disasters, the COVID-19 pandemic, smuggling, terrorism, using outdated technology, weak manufacturing connectivity, among others, are the pressing challenges in Africa.
Hakim Adi, professor of history of Africa, said the role of the diaspora was very important for the movement of Pan-Africanism to start and reach its current level. The professor said this at a public speech organized by the African Leadership Excellence Academy in collaboration with Addis Ababa University. In his speech, Professor Hakim, who has written several books on the history of Africa, said the rise of Pan-Africanism and reaching its current level is due to the struggle of African diasporas in different eras to unify Africa and free it from colonialism in various forms.
How the African diaspora relates to Africa today. And there are many ways that we could talk about this, but one is the question of remittances, and we often hear about remittances and how important they are. It's a significant contribution, and it's often one that is mentioned in the discussions of the AU, how important these contributions are. Of course, these contributions from Africans abroad illustrate something of the problems that African countries have, because it's very often, not always, but it's often those who are trained within African countries that then go abroad and are in a position to send back these remittances. And so it's an indication of some of the problems which exist within the African continent.
According to the professor, political institutions and political systems in Africa are Eurocentric and do not match with the mindset of Africans. And so he pointed out African political institutions and institutional system should be aligned with Africans.
People say African solutions for African problems, but African political institutions, why? Because they said the political institutions of the colonial period had been imposed on Africa. They were not African political systems. They were Eurocentric political systems. No Africans were consulted about these political systems. They weren't based on the traditions and so on and so forth. And again, you might consider whether those political systems and institutions exist in Africa today or not, or whether they're examples of African political institutions, African political systems.
Isa Kayertina, Kagulale Kolka Kaki Kalitiasko, Salam Kale Kele de Mexico.